the fact is that these sanctions on Russia had not only failed to bring about the collapse of the Russian economy, quite the reverse, as we've talked about many times, but they've been harmful, especially for Europe, but also for the U.S. There are a lot of U.S. corporations that fled Russia and they lost a lot of money. I mean, we're talking about often $100 million or more. And now they're talking about going back in. I mean, there was some sort of the report said Visa and MasterCard might want to go back into Russia and other corporations that left. Now, they'll if they go back into Russia now, they'll do okay. They'll make money, but actually they're going to find that it's a completely different environment. They're going to have stiff competition from local competitors because their absence of those 3 years allowed a lot of Russians to move into the vacuum that they left, and they've done quite well. They'll still be they'll still have their customers. They'll still do business, but they did make a big mistake by leaving. So yeah. Anyway, I think he understands, and his people understand that these sanctions actually were not good for the United States. They certainly weren't good for Europe, but sanctions are. It's actually when let's say you're going after a small country or a relatively small country like Iran, you can impose sanctions, cause them a great deal of damage. And because they account for a very small percentage of the world's market, or it doesn't really affect you. There's not much of a boomerang effect. But Russia is a different case. It's the world's largest commodity supplier. And it is a large market. It's a very significant market. It's the world's fourth largest economy. And so it was just clear that sanctions would have a boomerang effect, and it turned out to have a huge boomerang effect. And in the end, it didn't achieve the damage, but it's a case of shooting yourself in the foot, or as Viktor Orban says, shooting yourself in the lung when he's talking about Europe. They seem to understand that, and that's a reason to hope. Maybe we really can see some reduction or elimination of sanctions. The Europeans have stated that, even if the U.S. lifts sanctions, they're going to keep them. They just seem to be in a suicide pact. It's just crazy.
Can they do that? I mean, will it work if the U.S. is engaging in regular trade? Visa, MasterCard goes back in there, the dollar's allowed, and McDonald's opens back up. And then what is it that EU? It's like just no more Gucci bags. I mean, what exactly?
Yeah, right. Yeah, some European companies are still there. They didn't all flee. Yeah, well, they can do it, but it's just they're just not going to have. Clearly they failed with the U.S. And now if the U.S. actually breaks ranks and begins trading with Russia, then the impact. They're trying to punish Russia, but they just punish themselves. I mean,
exactly.
That logic is actually becomes all the more apparent or dominant. So it's ridiculous. These people are idiots, or they're just so much under the sway of this ideological vision and this notion of moral purity that they just seem incapable of thinking of practical realities.
Right. This war in Ukraine has exposed so many weaknesses in Western hegemony. I mean, militarily with NATO, we've just seen it, the inability to scale up in munitions production, and just the ineffectiveness of our weaponry. And then the other thing is also the financial warfare, the economic sanctions that you're talking about, that the freezing of the Russian assets, I think, has been incredibly damaging to the dollar. And we talked about that. That could really be one of the death knells for the U.S. If the dollar gets dethroned, and freezing those assets was a huge step in that, because countries like China are looking at that. The U.S. is being very antagonistic towards me. And we hold $1 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury. So we got to be careful. We got to diversify. We got to build another financial infrastructure to bypass them. But now, do you think that if the sanctions are lifted, and the U.S. lifts its sanctions and Visa, MasterCard go back in, is there, and do you think will they unfreeze that $300 billion of Russian assets and give it back to the Russians? And if they make these moves and let the dollar back in with Visa, MasterCard, unfreeze these assets, will that kind of stop that de-dollarization process that we've been seeing ever since the start of this? I mean, it's been going on for a while, but it definitely accelerated with these sanction packages.
I'm not sure if it's going to stop it. I mean, it's just, but it would slow it at least. Let's put it that way. One thing is just these countries, because they saw it happen, even if Trump begins to reverse some of it, he's also made threats about using the dollar as a weapon. Let's not forget that, right? And remember his threat, or even his claim to have destroyed BRICS. One of the more outlandish statements he's made. Let's not forget that Trump, though he's not a neocon, he still is interested in throwing America's weight around and wants to remain the top dog. And so people see that and they say, well, okay, maybe they're now regret what they did with Russia, but they may come after me, or and then who knows what's going to happen with the next administration. The fact, that this happened, the unthinkable happened, makes people look at the dollar differently. They can never see it as the same safe, reserve currency that they once saw it as. They can never see it that way again. The damage
is irreparable.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. Guys, thanks for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please check out my website, nobliski.io. You can look at the pinned comment below. It's something that I think you'll find useful. Even my dad uses it. My wife uses it. Instead of Googling things, you should be using this website because you get access to OpenAI, Perplexity, Anthropic, DeepSeek. There's hundreds of models that you can use. It's what I use to create the thumbnail images, things like this. And the greatest thing about it is there's no rate limits. There are no subscription fees. It's free to try out and use. You get free tokens every day. So if you're not a heavy AI user, you will never have to pay for anything. But this is really my passion project. I really want to get it off the ground, and I think you guys would like it. So yeah, check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you have time to download the apps and give it 5 stars, that'd mean a lot to me as well. Thanks a lot.